Alright, SmartSpin2k Shifter build. First stuff you're going to need are the straps here, made out of TPU, and then you have the plugs. The plugs just go on the back side of the TPU like that. And if you need to, the back side, sometimes there will be some bridging from your printer inside of there. TPU is really soft, so what you'll need to do is just go in there with a sharp tool, like a screwdriver works perfect for this, and just kind of get rid of some of the strands. Put your finger on the back side like that to make sure that you don't poke through. Just do that with both of the straps. And then the next thing you've got the switches, and those just go on the back side of each shifter strap. And then the RCA cable. It's kind of a shame that we have to take and cut the ends off these RCA cables, but honestly they're the cheapest thing that we can get that has cable and the 3.5mm jack on it that we need. Just because they mass produce them. I get them for mono price. They're like $1, maybe even less a piece. So the first thing that you want to do, keep that end, keep the 3.5mm end, and then we'll cut off the RCA cable ends. Not going to need those. And then take and strip back the insulation on the ends that have the RCA cable. It's best to use an automatic stripper like this because they've got that shield on the outside and then the center conductor on the inside. The automatic stripper works really good for getting rid of that. Next step is take the shifters and bend the pins in a little bit there. That just makes it easy to install it. Depending on your switches, where your supplier gets them from, they have a little bit longer leads on them sometimes. That's actually nice. These that I'm working with have really short leads, and it makes it hard to attach the wires on the inside if they have really short leads, but you can see I get it done on this. Now we're just going to take and push the switches down into the recesses in the shifter straps. There's no absolute certain way that you need to do this. They just need to go on the inside, and then you push them all of the way down. Now that that's done, what we're going to need to do is just take and push the cables all the way through into the shifter straps. I'm just making these leads a little bit longer here. Honestly, what you can do too is push them through those holes before you strip it. Sometimes it makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to give that extra twist that I'm doing, and it just sometimes goes in a little easier. But then you do have the issue of the strap kind of being in the way of when you're stripping the wires too. So a couple of little give and takes. It doesn't matter either way which way you do it. Now what you need to do is just take and separate the shield from the center conductor. You want to make sure that you get all of the little strands of wire away. Obviously, you know, this is pretty low current stuff that we're working with, so any shorts are going to cause shifting problems for you. So just make sure that you get all of those strands out of the way and everything's nice and perfectly separated. And the other thing is, keep in mind when you're stripping these back too that you're working in really small area. I've actually probably got a little bit too much stripped back on this on these wires right now, and you'll see that's why I'm having to go through and cut them. You know, 12 millimeters isn't much, so in a perfect world I guess you'd probably only have about 7 or 8 millimeters stripped on each wire. But just do whatever it takes to be comfortable. You need to maintain your clearances inside there so nothing shorts. Now for probably about the hardest part of this build is just getting these wires back into the position where you need them to be for the shifters, or for the actual switches. And again, the issue that I have with this batch of switches that I have is that the leads on them are pretty small, and so there isn't much room to work. Typically what I like to do is actually get those wires underneath the switch leads and then kind of bend the leads over completely on top of them like a tab. These are so short that I can really only get them next to the wire and then solder directly to it. Mechanically it should be a good connection, because later you'll see we're taking and filling this whole cavity with hot glue, so really nothing can move. And so as long as you know that you've got a good solder job on there, a good mechanical bond, and nothing should be able to come loose. And the hot glue also works as an insulator to keep your wires from touching each other once these are completely put together. Now that those are in place, we're just going to take and solder them down. A little bit of flux works great. If you watch these videos, I really like flux. It just helps everything. Sorry if you can't see much here. There's tight areas, and the soldering is pretty tough in these small areas, especially if I'm working on these black straps. I probably should have done this video with the red straps that I have been building, but the TPU that I have in black is actually a little bit nicer TPU for this. I'm finding that a firmer TPU may actually work better for these straps. You don't get quite so much bridging on the inside. Everything stays a little bit smoother in there. The switches go in better, and you end up with less issues with the tops of the switches having holes in them that could let sweat in or anything else. So when you solder these two, just make sure the important part here is that we go kitty corner on the switches, so diagonal. You don't want to solder straight across. The conductors on all of these 12 by 12 millimeter switches are diagonal. So just make sure that you're not touching any wires to any pins other than two opposite corners. You want one going to one corner and the other wire going to the other corner. In here we're just checking to make sure that we've got a really good mechanical bond there. Doesn't hurt, if you have one of these wires break or pull off, you'd much rather have it do it before you fill this cavity with hot glue. And I mean, at that point you're basically going to be throwing away two of your TPU prints, and I mean, you'll be able to salvage the RCA cable. I guess you'll just have to cut it back a little bit, which isn't an issue at all, but always much better to do a little bit of testing as you build. Just mechanically checking the connections here again, making sure that everything's good, and then I'm going to take and push that other ground wire for this shifter underneath that lead that I bent over on the switch, and then we just take and solder it again. And just checking that last lead, and then it looks like everything's all together. We've got two good soldered shifters. You can see they're at the diagonal. And now next what we're going to do is take and put the plugs in. We're done with the soldering iron, so we can do a little bit of cleanup here before the next step. Alright, so first, just grab your plugs. They're coming out to be about the right size these days, but there is a direction that they need to go. If it doesn't fit, you know, rotate a little bit there, make sure that you get the proper direction, pull it back out, and then we're going to take and pretty much fill up that whole cavity with hot glue. You'd rather have more than not enough. Seems like the next step here solves any issues with too much. It'll kind of just squeeze out the backside. So we put that plug in, and this one turned out good, nice and flush. Set it down on your bench, and then just keep pressing the button as the hot glue sets up. You'll eventually start feeling it actually start to click. It really does a nice job at this step of getting the switch into the proper place. If you don't do this step, you'll end up with a really mushy button. And these buttons don't come out exactly perfect. They do have a little bit of mush to them, but this step you'll be able to get it to where at least you can feel a click, if not hear it. You might not be able to hear it. The TPU does a really good job of sound insulation, but it is nice to get that proper feedback. So here then we just go and do the same on the next shifter. Fill it up with hot glue there, and put the plug in, and then about the most important step for the feel on these shifters again is to just flip it over on your bench and start pressing the button. Alright, and there we go. Brand new shifters built with a 3.5mm plug and one RCA cable completely destroyed, but it was fun, right? And worth it.